Thank you very much for the opportunity that I have the possibility to present here that what the Czech Republic achieved in the area of rights of the child, and of course to speak about it, what we have to achieve. As you know, my country has experienced a transition from a communism to democracy more than 20 years ago. And the 40 years of socialist regime brought us really a lot of bad things, but also something very good and positive in the relation to the rights of child, and they were implemented during these times. After the revolution, there was a very euphoric momentum, the era of commencing of democracy, and we wanted to dispose ourselves of everything that reminded us that times to this past, to the previous regime. And only now, after so many years, we are able to evaluate and to say that something happened to us, that in that time, in the euphoric time, we have also removed some policies that were very beneficial for children, and I have to say we had to implement them again later on. In my opinion, this is something what in our country is very unique. This experience with the transition regime and this coming into the democracy and really changing all behaviors and all kind of that what was happening in our society. And this is something what other countries maybe might also learn a lesson and bring these into the interest of their children and also our children. The Czech Republic has been the state party of the Convention of the Rights of the Child already for 22 years. We have ratified also 2 optional protocols on children in armed conflict and on safety of children and sexual exploitation of children. At the moment, we are at the very end of ratification process of the 3rd optional protocol introducing individual communication mechanism. Over those 22 years, Czech Republic has been implementing different laws and different reforms and really practical measures that seek to protect better and more effectively the rights of child. Let me briefly describe main challenges we had and identify processes which include intensive education, rights of children without parental care or in vulnerable situation, and protection of children against violence, which are the topics and main themes in our society. In the area of the right of education, the Czech Republic has a well-developed network of elementary and secondary schools, as well as vocational schools and universities. And today, the most challenging issue actually for us is inclusiveness. Over the years, a whole set of measures had been adopted to transform our educational system into a truly inclusive one, but of course, there are some stereotypes and discriminatory attitudes which take long and stressful effort to be challenged. Among them, new diagnostic instruments for children were developed to access more accurately children from different cultural backgrounds in our society, and in particular from socially disadvantaged backgrounds. The role of the counseling centers was transformed, and a new institute of assistant teachers supporting disadvantaged pupils and primary schools was created to help the pupils adjust to the preschool and school environment and to work with the pupils, with their families, with all teachers in addressing the everyday problems of the children with special educational needs. Many schools have opened Head Start classes and facilitate the integration of socially disadvantaged kids and children. And compulsory one-year preschool education had been introduced, was cancelled, had been introduced, had been cancelled during the 22 years, And now again, new program is being prepared, because the idea of the preschool education we think is very good, and we are coming back to this policy. Equal and non-discriminatory access to education is emphasized also in the area of education of children with disabilities, and their access to mainstream education used to depend on local conditions and the openness and equipment of each and one school. Now, in these days, it has become a fully fledged right of children with disabilities to attend their catchment school as non-disabled kids, and assistant teacher now expect to help them and serve them and to take care of themselves and more about the school during the school hours. Whole system of specific support measures designed to enable all pupils to receive full mainstream education and reach their full academic potential is being prepared nowadays. Education, despite being a tool for social mobility, can often remain a factor prolonging inequality and, of course, social exclusion. And among other, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, all the reforms and reports from this organization, they report about it. Be it on the grounds of disability, social status, or, of course, ethnicity in our case. In this context, our country experienced some difficulties with Roma children being educated in schools for mentally disabled children and losing thus any chance of higher or university education and any reasonable employment prospects, of course. But many of above-mentioned measures are already bringing results. The share of Roma pupils taught according to educational programs for pupils with mild mental disabilities is steadily very declining in our society. Another challenge we defined on our way of implementation was the question of institutionalization, placement of children into state facilities. While formal declaration of institutional care being the last possibility was included in the law, in practice not many other alternatives were really used. Nowadays, individual forms of care must be considered first. Also, if a child is placed in institutional care, the court has regularly to reconsider whether the need for such solution still continues or a better option has been discovered for the kid. Child protection authorities are now explicitly banned from requesting courts to interfere with parental responsibilities only because of the family's economic hardship or unsatisfactory housing. A new concept of social accommodation has been adopted only recently in my country to address the situation and ensure in the near future that the families in such dire situations receive appropriate support. A legal ban on placement of children under a certain age into institutional care remains a stage of a draft bill. Also, Minister of Labour and Social Affairs last year introduced a campaign and national action plan which is called The Right to Childhood, striving further to limit the overuse of institutional care through building a professional foster care services and process where foster carers are being totally trained before entering to the service, receive every kit of support and every kind of support when fostering a child and whose care is adequately monitored. Specific issue in the area of rights of child that recently provokes a great discussion, and that is for me personally very interesting, is the perception of the term of violence against children. The interpretation of this term might be perceived very differently in different cultures and societies, and we must therefore very much distinguish what can be considered a disciplinary measure and what must be legally addressed as a violence against child. Our country had been very much criticized on the international fora in the past because our legal system does not contain a very explicit ban on corporal punishment of children in families. Although we do not have such an explicit ban, it does not mean that we don't violence against children in all settings. According to our law, parents are only allowed to use disciplinary measures that are appropriate and proportionate to the situation, do not endanger the child's health and development, and do not violate the child's human dignity. Parents who use unreasonable corporal punishment may have their parental rights taken away or restricted. Parents who unintentionally and intentionally injured a child by corporal punishment and who treat or threaten to treat a child harshly may be held liable. In the case of injury is caused internationally and intentionally, the case may be classified as the crime of bodily harm, and in extreme cases, the crime may fall under the heading of ill-threatening a dependent person. Also, one of the basic goals and priorities in our national strategy and planned action against violence against children is to promote positive parenting and children's right to be brought up without corporal punishment. And to this end, the Czech Republic has adopted legislative measures developing services to help parents improve their parenting competencies and organize educational and awareness programs to overcome traditional benevolent towards corporal punishment of children at our homes. Our government policies generally have embraced also the newest phenomenon in the rights of the child, and this is the right to participation, which has required a society to change long-held beliefs and traditional related to childhood. Today, a number of elementary and secondary schools alike have their own students' parliaments, as do some municipalities. More and more teachers are learning new methods or working with children with full respect and support to their right to participate in discussion and decision-making that influence their lives. And we continue, of course, challenging remaining stereotypes and empowering children to become active players in their daily lives. According to our new civil code, children aged over 12 years are considered capable of forming and communicating their own views, and the child's view should be taken into account in all matters affecting the child. When dealing with younger children, every judge or their decision-making must address their intellectual and violational maturity and provide them with any information that may need to form and communicate their own views. And I think that's something very natural here in the United States. It's not so natural, all this, in other parts of the world, and it's starting to be very natural in my country. Ladies and gentlemen, Oscar Wilde said, "Children begin by loving their parents. As they grow older, they judge them, and sometimes they forgive them." So let me conclude by expressing my deepest hope that the wide scale of efforts undertaken to implement better the rights of the child in the Czech Republic will represent for our child, when they judge us one day, the reason to forgive us, and moreover to grow up with the strength and courage, wisdom and understanding to be the future of our society we hope for. And thank you very much for your attention.